When HOA Karen buried my son's backpack in her yard, she thought she was teaching us a lesson about following rules. But inside that backpack was more than just a school project. It contained classified government documents that would destroy her life and change our neighborhood forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you're watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as I watched my 8-year-old son Danny bounce down the front steps, his bright blue backpack bouncing with each step. He was excited about the school science fair, clutching a poster about butterflies he'd worked on for weeks. "Dad, do you think I'll win?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with hope. I knelt down and straightened his collar. "Win or lose, I'm proud of you, buddy." Danny had been through so much in his short life. After his mother died in a car accident 2 years ago, it was just the two of us against the world. This science project was the first time I'd seen him truly excited about something since the funeral. He'd spent countless evenings in our small garden, carefully observing caterpillars transform into butterflies, documenting every stage with the dedication of a real scientist. As Danny walked to the school bus, I noticed our neighbor Karen Mitchell watching from her pristine lawn. Her arms were crossed and she had that familiar scowl on her face. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, a woman who seemed to find joy only in making others miserable. I tried to ignore her and went inside to get ready for work. As a single father working 2 jobs, morning shift at the hospital as a nurse and evening shifts at a local clinic, every day was a struggle. But seeing Danny's smile made it all worth it. That afternoon everything changed. I came home from my morning shift to find Danny sitting on our front porch, tears streaming down his face. His backpack was gone. "Danny? What's wrong, son?" "My backpack," he sobbed. "It's gone. All my science fair stuff was in there. My butterfly project, my notebook with all the observations, everything." My heart sank. "Where did you last see it?" "I left it on the porch this morning because I forgot my lunch money. When I came back from school it was gone." I looked around our yard, then checked with neighbors. No one had seen anything. Finally, I knocked on Karen's door. "Karen, did you happen to see Danny's backpack?" "He left it on our porch and—" "That eyesore?" she interrupted. "I disposed of it properly." "Disposed of it?" I felt my blood pressure rising. "What do you mean disposed of it?" "According to HOA regulations, personal items cannot be left visible from the street. It was cluttering the neighborhood aesthetic." "Karen, that backpack had my son's school project in it. Weeks of work." She shrugged. "Should have taught him to be more responsible. I buried it in my backyard compost pile. It's biodegradable after all." I stared at her in disbelief. "You buried my son's backpack?" "His school project. Rules are rules, Mike. If you don't like it, take it up with the HOA board." That night, Danny cried himself to sleep. The science fair was in 2 days, and there was no way to recreate weeks of careful observations. I held him as his small body shook with sobs. "I worked so hard, Dad. I wanted to make Mom proud." Those words broke my heart. I made a decision that night. I would get that backpack back no matter what it took. The next morning, I went to Karen's house with a shovel. "I'm digging up my son's backpack," I announced. "You will not," she shrieked. "That's trespassing. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, already starting to dig in the composted area where she'd pointed the day before. "Tell them you stole a child's schoolwork." It took me 2 hours of digging through rotting vegetables and garden waste, but I found it. The backpack was ruined, covered in decomposing food and mud. But inside, protected by a plastic folder, was Danny's butterfly project. Damaged but salvageable. Karen had called the police as threatened. Officer Rodriguez arrived as I was cleaning off the project papers with a garden hose. "Sir, I need you to stop what you're doing," he said gently. I explained the situation. Officer Rodriguez looked at the muddy backpack, then at Karen, then back at me. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "did you take this child's property without permission?" I was enforcing HOA regulations. "That doesn't give you the right to take someone else's belongings. You could have knocked on their door or left a note." Officer Rodriguez let me go with a warning about trespassing, but Karen's face was red with embarrassment as neighbors gathered to watch the spectacle. Danny was thrilled to have his project back, even damaged. We spent that evening carefully cleaning and repairing what we could. The photos were water damaged and some of his notes were illegible, but his determination was inspiring. "We can fix this, Dad. I remember everything I wrote." The science fair didn't go as planned. Danny's project looked rough compared to the pristine displays around it. But when he presented his research, his passion shone through. He talked about the butterfly life cycle with such knowledge and enthusiasm that the judges were impressed despite the project's bedraggled appearance. He won third place. It wasn't first, but seeing his proud smile as he held that bronze ribbon made me feel like we'd won the lottery. I thought that was the end of our troubles with Karen. I was wrong. Over the next few months, Karen made our lives miserable. She reported us to the HOA for every minor infraction she could find. Our grass was supposedly too long. The garden gnome Danny had made in art class was inappropriate yard decoration. Our mailbox needed repainting. Each citation came with fines. Each fine was another bill I couldn't afford. I was already stretched thin financially, working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. Karen seemed to take pleasure in our struggles. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in November. I was getting ready for my evening shift at the clinic when there was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor. "Mike, honey, I think you should see this." She led me to her window, which overlooked Karen's backyard. There was Karen digging through our garbage bins, which she dragged onto her property. "She's been doing this for weeks," Mrs. Henderson whispered, "looking for evidence of HOA violations. Today she found something and got all excited." My blood ran cold. In those garbage bags was paperwork from the clinic where I worked part-time. Not patient information. I would never compromise patient privacy, but internal memos about staffing schedules and policy updates. Information that, in the wrong hands, could be misunderstood or misrepresented. But there was something else in those bags. Something Karen didn't know about. Something that could change everything. You see, I hadn't told anyone in our neighborhood about my other job. Besides working at the hospital and clinic, I did some freelance work for a document security company. Sometimes I brought paperwork home to work on in the evenings, confidential reports that needed to be shredded after review. Last week, I brought home a stack of documents that needed secure disposal. Among them were some papers I'd accidentally grabbed from the wrong pile at the office. When I realized my mistake, I'd thrown them in the trash, planning to retrieve them later for proper disposal. Those papers contained sensitive information about Governor Williams' upcoming healthcare policy announcements, draft speeches, policy memos, and confidential polling data. Nothing illegal or scandalous, but definitely not meant for public consumption before the official announcement. Karen had no idea what she'd stumbled onto. She was probably planning to use some mundane paperwork to report me for bringing work materials home, violating some obscure HOA rule about home businesses. I watched her stuff the papers into a folder and head inside, probably to spend the evening crafting another complaint letter. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I called my supervisor at the document security company and explained what had happened. They were concerned but grateful that I'd reported the breach immediately. Within hours, they'd contacted the governor's office. By morning, there were unmarked cars parked outside Karen's house. I was getting Danny ready for school when Karen came storming over, her face purple with rage. "What did you do?" she screamed. "There are government agents at my house." "I don't know what you're talking about, Karen." "They said I have stolen government documents. That I'm being investigated for potential espionage." Danny looked scared, so I gently guided him inside and called Mrs. Henderson to walk him to the school bus. "Karen, I suggest you talk to those agents. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." But it wasn't a misunderstanding. Karen had indeed taken classified documents, even if she didn't realize what they were. The fact that she'd stolen them from someone else's garbage while trespassing didn't help her case. The investigation took weeks. During that time, Karen's house was searched, her computers were confiscated, and her every move was scrutinized. The stress was clearly taking its toll. She looked haggard and suspicious, jumping at every sound. The media eventually picked up the story. Local HOA president under federal investigation for possession of classified documents. Karen's picture was in the newspaper and news vans parked on our street. Her husband filed for divorce. Her adult children stopped speaking to her. The HOA board voted her out of her position. Eventually, the investigation concluded that Karen had no malicious intent. She was just a nosy neighbor who'd taken things too far. But the damage was done. The legal fees bankrupted her. She had to sell the house and move in with her sister across the state. On her last day in the neighborhood, she knocked on my door one final time. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice broken. "You've ruined my life." I looked at this woman who had made our lives miserable for months, who had buried my son's precious schoolwork out of spite, who had harassed us with endless HOA complaints. "Karen," I said quietly, "all you had to do was knock on my door and ask me to move the backpack. Instead, you chose to bury it in your compost pile. You chose to dig through my garbage. You chose to make a little boy cry. Every single step of this was your choice. She had no answer for that. She turned and walked away, and I never saw her again. 6 months later, Danny won first place at the school science fair with a project about neighborhood ecosystems. His poster board was perfect, his research was thorough, and his presentation was confident and clear. As I watched him accept his blue ribbon, I thought about how far we'd come. The ordeal with Karen had been difficult, but it had also taught us both something important about standing up for ourselves and each other. That evening, as we celebrated with ice cream on the front porch, Danny looked up at me with serious eyes. "Dad, do you think Mrs. Mitchell learned her lesson?" I considered his question carefully. "I hope so, buddy. Sometimes people need to lose everything before they understand that being kind is more important than being right." Danny nodded thoughtfully, then brightened. "Want to see the butterfly that just landed in Mom's rose bush?" As we watched the butterfly dance among the roses my wife had planted years ago, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. Karen was gone, but her actions had inadvertently brought our neighborhood closer together. Mrs. Henderson had become like a grandmother to Danny. Other neighbors who'd been afraid to stand up to Karen's HOA tyranny had found their voices. Sometimes the worst people in our lives end up teaching us the most valuable lessons, not through their wisdom but through their mistakes. Karen taught me that bullies only have power if we let them, and that protecting the people we love sometimes requires taking risks. Most importantly, she taught me that a father's love can move mountains, or at least dig through compost piles to save a little boy's dreams. As Danny and I sat there watching butterflies in the golden evening light, I realized that Karen's attempt to bury his project had backfired in the most beautiful way possible. Instead of crushing his spirit, she'd only made him stronger. And sometimes, that's the best revenge of all, not the destruction of your enemies, but the triumph of everything they tried to destroy. The butterfly landed on Danny's outstretched finger, and he smiled with the pure joy that only children possess. In that moment, I knew that no HOA Karen could ever bury that light. We had won in every way that mattered.